She changed the locks while I was at work, not as a figure of speech, not the slow, metaphorical lock changing of someone withdrawing their trust or their welcome. Literal locks, physical locks, new ones, installed between 7 in the morning when I left and 3 in the afternoon when I returned, replaced by a locksmith who had been given specific instructions that I was not to be given a key. I stood at the door of the Cresthold Pack house, my key in my hand. Not fitting. I had been a member of Cresthold Pack for 6 years. I had been the Pack's assistant healer for 3. I had been living in the Pack house, the communal residence for Pack staff and key personnel, for 2 years, in the room on the eastern side with the window that looked out at the old pine grove. I had been standing at this specific door for exactly 47 seconds. I know it was 47 seconds because I counted, not because I was calm, because I needed something to do with my mind while my hands were trying my key again, methodically, in case I had miscounted, in case there was some other explanation, in case the locksmith had made an error, in case this was not what it looked like. It was what it looked like. I lowered my key. I stepped back from the door. And I became aware, in the way that you became aware of things when the primary situation had just resolved into something too large for immediate processing, of a small face watching me through the window beside the door. Dren Solas, 5 years old, the Luna's son, standing on the inside of the window with his small hands pressed flat against the glass, watching me with the specific, serious attention of a child who understood that something significant was happening but did not yet have the framework to understand what. We looked at each other through the glass. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes. And he had always had, a quality of attention that was older than 5 years. The specific, careful attentiveness of a child who had grown up in complicated circumstances and had developed, early, the habit of watching. He watched me. I watched him. And then he said something. Through the glass. Too muffled to hear. But I could read his lips. He said, "Mama." Not to his mother. She was not at the window. To me. The woman standing on the outside of the locked door with her key that no longer fit. He said, "Mama." And then, before I could process that, before I could even begin to understand what he meant or what it cost him to say it, or what the saying of it was going to mean for everything that came next, he reached up, on his tiptoes, and he unlocked the door from the inside, and opened it, and stood in the doorway of the Pack house, and looked at me, and said it again, this time where I could hear it. "Mama, if you have ever been locked out of a life that was also yours, stay with this story. Because that little boy opening the door was the beginning of the truth that was going to change everything." Like the video, hit that subscribe button right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. You are not ready for what this child knew. Let's begin. My name is Fen Coll. I am 27 years old, and I have been in Cresthold Pack for 6 years. And in those 6 years I have made what I believed was a permanent life. The believing was, apparently, the problem. I came to Cresthold at 21, fresh from the Healer Institute, through the placement network that matched qualified practitioners with packs that needed them. Cresthold needed a second healer. Their primary healer, a meticulous woman named Brost, had been managing the pack's medical needs alone for 3 years following the retirement of her predecessor. And 3 years of solo practice in a pack of 300 wolves was the kind of sustained load that produced, eventually, a very specific kind of exhaustion. Brost had welcomed me with the frank, uncomplicated relief of someone who had been drowning and had been thrown a rope. I had been the rope. I had also, in the 6 years since, become a great deal more than a rope. I had become part of the fabric. Not conspicuously. I was not, by nature or circumstance, the kind of person who made conspicuous contributions. I was the kind of person whose contributions were visible primarily in the absence of them. The patients whose care I had been managing for 3 years knew me. The pack's pups, who came in for their wellness assessments, knew me. The older wolves whose long-term conditions I had been monitoring knew me. I was part of Cresthold, or I had thought I was. The locked door suggested a complication. Let me tell you about the Luna of Cresthold Pack. Her name was Petra Voss. She was 30 years old. She had come to Cresthold 8 months ago, married to the Alpha, Dren Solas, the 40-year-old Alpha who had been running Cresthold's governance for 7 years with the specific, steady capability of a man who understood his responsibilities and met them. The marriage had been sudden by Cresthold's standards, not rushed. The formal process had taken 4 months, but the relationship itself was of short acquaintance. Kale and Petra had met at a regional governance summit and had returned to Cresthold 3 months later engaged. The pack had been surprised, not critically. Packs understood that Alpha's personal lives were their own. But the surprise was there in the ambient, the specific, collective recalibration of a community that had developed a settled understanding of its Alpha and was now absorbing new information. And Petra had come with Dren. Dren Solas was Kale's son, born 5 years ago to a previous relationship, not a mate bond. The pack records noted without elaboration, just a relationship that had produced a child and then ended. Kale had been raising Dren alone for 4 years before Petra arrived. He was a serious child. I had known him for 6 years, since he was a newborn, delivered by Brost on a cold night in January, which I had assisted with as part of my first week on-site training. I had attended his wellness assessments. I had treated his childhood illnesses. I had read to him in the healing house waiting room when his father brought him in at 2 years old with a fever that was worrying, and at 3 years old with the cold that he could not shake, and at 4 years old with the small wound on his knee that he had received from the garden wall, and which his father, despite being the Alpha of 300 wolves, had apparently found very distressing. I had known Dren since he was born. He had known me since he was born. In the specific way that small children knew the adults in their consistent vicinity, not with the articulated, relational language that adults used, but with the animal certainty of a child who recognized who was safe. He had always reached for me, not in the dramatic, supernaturally significant way that the birth room incident in a different story might suggest. In the ordinary, practical way of a child who had spent his entire life watching his father bring him to the healing house and who associated the healing house with comfort and competence and the specific smell of the compound library that I maintained. He reached for me the way children reached for the familiar. Petra had noticed. The first 3 months of Petra's time in Cresthold had been, I will be fair about this, complicated for everyone. Not because she was unkind. She was not unkind in the obvious sense. She was efficient and organized and had the specific quality of someone who had clear ideas about how things should work and the energy to implement those ideas. She had clear ideas about how Cresthold's pack house should work. She had clear ideas about the Alpha's role and the Luna's role and the relationship between those roles and the pack's wider community. She had clear ideas about her stepson, about what was appropriate for him, who should be around him, what kind of relationships he should have with which pack members. And she had clear ideas about me. Or rather, she had developed them over 3 months of watching Dren reach for me in the healing house and asking for me when he was unwell and bringing me the things he found. The interesting stones, the leaves with unusual shapes, the drawings he produced with the specific, concentrated effort of a 5-year-old who had decided that drawing was his primary medium of communication. He brought those things to his father, and to me, and not to anyone else. Petra had watched this, and she had drawn conclusions. I understood the conclusions. They were not irrational conclusions from where she was standing. She had come into a household where her new stepson had a specific, established connection to a woman who was not her, and she was trying to establish her own connection with the child and the presence of a pre-existing connection that she could not replicate on demand was. I understood why it was uncomfortable. What I had not expected was the locked door. What I had not expected was the specific, deliberate escalation from discomfort to action without a single conversation. She had not come to me. She had not said, I am finding this difficult. She had not said, I need you to be more careful about how you relate to Dren in front of me. She had not said anything. She had waited until I left for my morning shift, and she had called the locksmith. Dren stood in the doorway. I stood on the doorstep. He had said, "Mama." I needed to address that before anything else, before the locked door and the key that didn't fit and the conversation that was going to have to happen. I crouched down to his level. "Hey," I said. "Buddy." He looked at me with the gray eyes. "The door was locked," he said. "Yes," I said. "I opened it," he said. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." He looked at me for a moment. "Petra locked it," he said. "I know," I said. "She was on the phone," he said. "Before she locked it. She was talking to somebody. She was crying." I was very still. "She was upset," I said carefully. "She's been upset," he said. "For a few days." "About," he stopped. The specific hesitation of a 5-year-old who understood that some things were adult things and was trying to navigate that boundary. "About something I did?" I asked. He looked at me with the serious attention. "About you," he said. "And Papa." I absorbed this. "Okay," I said. "Is your Papa home?" "He's in his office," Dren said. "Can you go get him for me?" I said. "Can you tell him Fun is at the door?" He considered this seriously. "Will you stay?" he asked. "I'll stay right here," I said. He nodded. He turned and went back inside, leaving the door open. I straightened up. I stood on the doorstep with my key in my hand and the cool afternoon air moving through the pines and the specific, contained feeling of someone who has just had a child open a door for them and call them mama and is trying very hard to hold all of that as information rather than as feeling, because the feeling was going to have to wait. The feeling was going to have to wait for a while. Kale appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later. Dren Solas was 40 years old and had the quality that 40-year-old alphas had when they had been doing the work for 7 years and had found their competence without losing their humanity. A groundedness, a settled quality, the specific stillness of someone who did not need to perform authority because authority had become how they simply were. He looked at me. He looked at the door. He looked at my key. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Come inside." "Petra changed the locks," I said. "I know," he said. "Were you aware before it happened?" I asked, because this mattered enormously. "No," he said. "I was not aware before it happened." I held that. "Come inside," he said again. "Dren is watching from the stairs." I looked past him. Dren was, in fact, sitting on the third stair with his chin in his hands, watching with the serious attention. I came inside. The conversation happened in Kale's office. Dren had been settled with a book in his room, not by Petra, who I gathered was somewhere in the eastern wing of the pack house, by Kale, who had the specific, practiced capability of a father who had been handling the logistics of a small child's emotional management for 4 years. We sat down. Kale looked at the work table. Then he looked at me. "Petra talked to me last night," he said, "about her concerns." "Concerns," I said. "About Dren's attachment to you," he said. He stopped. "She feels that the attachment is preventing him from forming a healthy bond with her." I sat with that. "The attachment developed over 5 years," I said. "It developed because I have been his primary medical caregiver since he was born. It developed because he spent a significant portion of his early childhood in the healing house, which I ran the child's wellness side of." "I know," he said. "It is not," I said carefully, "an attachment that I cultivated inappropriately. I have always been aware of the lines." "I know that too," he said. "Then what?" "Petra does not have that context," he said. "She arrived 8 months ago. What she sees is a child who seeks out a specific woman with a frequency and a quality of connection that—" He stopped. "That makes her feel excluded," I said. "Yes," he said. I looked at the work table. "And the locked door," I said. "Was that her solution?" He was quiet. "She was in distress," he said. "She was not thinking strategically. He stopped. "She acted from a place of pain. She locked me out of my home," I said. "I know," he said, without a conversation. "Yes," he said. "Kale." I looked at him. "I have been in this pack for 6 years. I have lived in this house for 2. I have been Dren's primary medical caregiver since he was born. And the first indication I received that there was a problem was a key that didn't fit. He looked at the work table. That was wrong, he said. What she did was wrong. I want to be clear about that. And I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. And I need to ask you something, he said. Not as the alpha. As someone who is trying to navigate a difficult situation honestly. Ask, I said. How does Dren feel about you, he asked. Not how he behaves in your presence. How does he feel? What is the nature of that connection, from your understanding of it? I thought about this carefully. I thought about 5 years of wellness assessments and childhood fevers and small wounds and interesting stones and leaves with unusual shapes and drawings. I thought about Mama said through a window. I had to tell him about that. He called me Mama, I said. Today, when he saw me at the door. He said it through the glass, and then he said it again when he opened the door. Cale was very still. He said, Mama, he said. Yes, I said. To you. Yes. The silence that followed was the specific silence of something arriving. He has never called Petra Mama, Cale said slowly. She has been here 8 months. She has tried. She reads to him. She takes him to the market. He stopped. She has been genuinely trying. I know, I said. And he has not. No, I said. I know he hasn't. But he called you Mama, he said. Yes, I said. We sat with that together. Why, he asked. Not rhetorically. The genuine question of a father trying to understand his child. I don't know, I said. Maybe because I am the closest thing to the word that his body recognized. Maybe because 5 years of consistent, caring presence registers as something. Maybe, I stopped. Maybe what, he asked. I looked at him. I had been not looking at something for 6 years. I had been very carefully not looking at it. I had been careful about the lines. I had maintained the professional register. I had kept what I felt, what I had been feeling since approximately year 2, when the professional relationship had deepened into something that was still professional, but was also other things. I had kept that in the place where it lived, which was somewhere that I had never given it air. Because he had Dren, and he was the alpha, and I was the assistant healer, and the appropriate registers were the appropriate registers. And then he had married Petra, and the appropriate registers had become even more important. Maybe, I said carefully, the word means something about the quality of the connection. Children use the language they have for the feelings they recognize. He was very still. Fun, he said. Yes. Look at me, he said. I looked at him. He was looking at me the way he had never looked at me in 6 years. Not the alpha to healer look. Not the professional register. The person look. How long have you felt, he started. Don't, I said. I need to. Cale, I said. You are married. Your son just called me Mama while your wife is somewhere in this house crying. This is not the conversation to have right now. He was quiet. You're right, he said. I know, I said. But we're having it eventually, he said. Eventually is not today, I said. No, he said. Not today. He looked at the work table. What do we do today? Today, I said. You talk to Petra. Not about me. About the locked door and the conversation that should have happened before the locked door. About the fact that removing someone's access to their home without warning or discussion is not a proportionate response to feeling insecure. Yes, he said. And today, I said, I find somewhere else to stay while that conversation happens and whatever comes next happens. You don't have to. I do, I said. Whatever is right for Dren includes Petra having the space to work through this without me in the building. I am not going to make that harder than it already is. He looked at me. You are very, he stopped. I'm very what? I asked. You always put the child first, he said. He is 5 years old, I said. The adults in this situation have options. He doesn't. Cale was quiet. I'll talk to Asta, I said. Asta ran the Pack's post office and was my closest friend in Cresthold and always had a spare room. I'll stay there tonight. Fun. Have the conversation with Petra, I said. I'll be at the healing house tomorrow at 7. I stood up. I walked out of the office. I did not look at him again. I went to Dren's room. I knocked. Come in, he said. He was sitting on his bed with the book, which he was holding upside down in the specific way of children who were not reading, but were performing reading as a way of being in private. I sat on the edge of the bed. I have to go stay somewhere else tonight, I said. He looked at me. Why? He asked. Because some things need to be talked about, I said. And they're easier to talk about when I'm not in the building. Are you coming back? He asked. I looked at this 5-year-old boy with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes and the serious attention and the word he had said through a window. I am always going to be your healer, I said. I am always going to be at the healing house. Nothing that happens changes that. He thought about this. But are you coming back to the house? He asked. I was honest with him. I don't know yet, I said. That depends on some conversations that haven't happened yet. He nodded. He held up the book. Do you want to read to me before you go? He asked. I took the book. I turned it right side up. I read 3 chapters. Then I went to Asta's. Asta fed me dinner. This was what Asta did when things were difficult. Not immediately ask what was wrong, or offer advice, or perform the empathy of someone who wanted to be helpful. Feed you first. Because difficult things were easier to process with something warm in your stomach. And because feeding someone was the most direct available expression of care that did not require words. I ate. Then I told her everything. The locked door. The key. Dren in the window. Dren opening the door. The word he had said. The conversation with Kale. The 6 years of keeping what I felt in the place where it lived. Asta listened. She was very quiet for a long time after I finished. Then, how long? She asked. 2 years, I said. Maybe 2.5. And you never? No, I said. He never. He never indicated, I said. Or if he did, I was not reading it. You were reading it, she said. I looked at her. You were reading it and choosing not to acknowledge it, she said. Because of the appropriate registers. Yes, I said. And then he married Petra. Yes. She was quiet. And Dren, she said. Yes, I said. Why do you think he said it? She asked. The word. I had been thinking about this since 3 in the afternoon. I think, I said slowly, that 5-year-olds have one word for the specific quality of presence that I have had in his life. And that word is what he used. The maternal word, she said. Yes, I said. Not because you are his mother, she said. No, I said. Because you are the closest thing his body has to the concept, she said. Yes, I said. She was quiet. Fun, she said. Yes. What do you want? She asked. Not what is right or appropriate or what the correct response to the situation is. What do you actually want? I looked at her kitchen table. I had been keeping what I wanted in a specific place for 2.5 years. I want to be in that house, I said. Not because of the room or the location. Because of the people in it. Dren, she said. And Kale, I said. Asta was quiet. You know that's complicated, she said. I know it's complicated, I said. That's why it has been in the place it lives for 2.5 years. He's married. I know he's married. To a woman who locked you out of the building today. Yes, I said. And yet, I said. Asta looked at me for a long moment. Go to bed, she said. Tomorrow the conversations happen. You can't control what happens in that house tonight. You can sleep and be at the healing house at 7 and be good at your job and let tomorrow be tomorrow. You're very sensible, I said. I run the post office, she said. I have to be sensible. Everybody's business comes through my hands. If I weren't sensible, I would know everything about everyone and also be having a crisis about all of it. I went to bed. I did not sleep for a long time. But eventually, the conversation between Kale and Petra lasted, apparently, for hours. I knew this because Asta knew everything that moved through Cresthold's information currents. And because the 4-hour conversation produced a specific atmospheric shift in the pack house that the neighborhood felt without being able to articulate. I was at the healing house from 7. I saw 6 patients. I conducted a wellness assessment for 2 of the pack's older wolves. I documented everything with the focused thoroughness of someone who was directing their full attention to the work because the work was what they had control over. At noon, Brost came to find me. She sat down across from me in the small consultation room. She looked at me with the specific, unsurprised attention of someone who had known me for 6 years and had been watching events with the quiet observation of a very experienced person. Cale called me this morning, she said. I looked at her. He wants to speak to you, she said. This afternoon. In his office. Is Petra? She left for her sister's this morning, Bros said. For a few days. She and Cale are. She stopped. They've arrived somewhere. In the conversation. That needed some space around it. How is Dren? I asked. Cale took him to the eastern forest for the morning, she said. They're back now. He's with his father. I thought about a 5-year-old who had watched his world shift again, in the specific way that children who had grown up in complicated circumstances watch their worlds shift, with the serious attention and the adaptation that came from having developed the habit of watching. I'll go at 2, I said. Cale was in his office. Dren was on the sitting room sofa with a plate of the lunch that had clearly just been made for him, watching a program on the small screen with the concentrated attention of a child who was being given comfort in the form of normal routine. I stopped beside the sofa. Hey, I said. Dren looked up. Hey, he said. Are you okay? I asked. He thought about it. Petra went to her sister's, he said. I know, I said. She was sad this morning, he said. I know, I said. Was it because of what I said, he asked. The word. He meant the word. He was 5 years old, and he understood cause and effect. No, I said. No, it was not because of what you said. What you said was honest. There is nothing wrong with honest. He considered this. Okay, he said. Okay, I said. Enjoy your lunch. I went to the office. Cale was at the work table. Not working. Sitting at the work table with his hands folded and the specific, focused quality of someone who has been in a 4-hour conversation and has arrived at a place that needs to be communicated carefully. I sat down. We looked at each other. Tell me, I said. He took a breath. Petra and I talked last night, he said. For a long time. I'm going to tell you what was said because you are the person most affected by it and you deserve to hear it directly. Yes, I said. Petra told me, he said slowly, that she has been aware, since she arrived, that something was different about this household than what she had been led to expect. What do you mean? I asked. She said she had been led to expect, he said carefully, that Cale was a widower. That Dren's mother had died. I was very still. You told her Dren's mother died? I asked. No, he said. I did not tell her that. I told her that Dren's mother was not in his life and that it was not a situation I was going to discuss in detail. I thought she understood. He stopped. What she apparently understood was the worst possible interpretation of not going to discuss in detail. She interpreted it as grief, as a past that was too painful to speak of. And the truth? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. The truth, he said, is something I have not told anyone in this pack. Not fully, because it is complicated and because I did not know how to frame it, and because Dren's privacy. He stopped. Tell me, I said. He looked at the work table. Dren's mother is alive, he said. She lives in the Western Territories. She made a decision, when Dren was 18 months old, that she did not want to be a mother. Not to Dren specifically. She was not well when she made that decision, in the ways that people are sometimes not well, and the decision was genuine and it was made in the way that she could make it at the time. He paused. She signed a formal relinquishment when he was 2. She has no legal claim on him and no standing in his life. I absorbed this. He doesn't know she's alive, I said. Not yet, he said. He knows he is only a papa. He is 5. The full truth is something that will be given to him as he grows into the ability to hold it. Okay, I said. And Petra thought she was dead. Yes, he said. Which is why he stopped. Which is why Dren calling you mama produced the specific response it produced. I looked at him. She thought he was replacing his dead mother with me. I said. She thought, he said carefully, that you had been filling a role in this household that she was not told about when she made the decision to marry me. She thought the attachment Dren had to you was the attachment a child had to a surrogate mother. And she thought I had hidden that from her. Had you? I asked. He was quiet. Not intentionally, he said. I did not think of it in those terms. I did not see what she was seeing. I was too close to it. What were you seeing? I asked. A healer who was excellent with my son, he said. A professional relationship. I looked at him. It's more than that, I said. Yes, he said. I know that now. I have known it for a while. I told myself it wasn't. I held that. What did you tell Petra? I asked. The truth, he said. About Dren's mother. About the relinquishment. About why he did not talk about it. He paused. About what I felt. I was very still. What you felt about what? I asked. He looked at me. The person look. Not the alpha. Not the professional register. About you, he said. The room was very quiet. Kale, I said. I told her the truth, he said. About everything. Because Petra deserved the truth, and because I was done keeping things in places where they didn't belong. What did she say? I asked. She was quiet for a long time, he said. And then she said something I did not expect. What? I asked. She said she had known, he said. From the first month. She had seen something in how this household was organized around a specific person, and she had felt the presence of it without understanding its shape. She had been fighting something she could not name for 8 months. She was fighting what was already here, I said. Yes, he said. And she said, he stopped. She said that she did not know if she could build something real in a space that was already full. I looked at the work table. She's right, I said. Fun. She's right, I said again. You can't build something new in a space that is already occupied. That's just physics. Yes, he said. So what happens now? I asked. He was very quiet. Petra and I are going to have more conversations, he said. She is at her sister's for 3 days. We are going to talk. And at the end of those conversations, we are going to make honest decisions about what is real and what is sustainable. And in the meantime, I said. In the meantime, he said, I want to ask you something. Ask, I said. What do you want, he asked. Not what is appropriate. Not what the situation requires. What do you want? I looked at him. I had answered this question for Asta in her kitchen the night before. I had been honest with Asta. I was going to be honest here. I want to be in this house, I said. For the right reasons. Not because I maneuvered my way in or because a situation collapsed and I stepped into the space it left. Because it is genuinely, honestly the right place for me to be. And if Petra and I, that is not my decision, I said. That is yours and hers. I am not going to let what I want influence that decision. Whatever you and Petra decide should be decided entirely between you and her, without the pressure of what I want. He looked at me. You are, he said, the most honest person I have encountered in a very long time. I am a healer, I said. We deal in accurate assessment. Not only a healer, he said. Kale. I looked at him directly. Have the conversations with Petra. Take the 3 days. I will be at the healing house at 7 every morning, and I will be excellent at my job, and I will not be a presence in this situation until the situation has resolved itself. And Dren, he asked. Dren has a wellness assessment due next week, I said. He will come to the healing house as scheduled. That is a medical relationship that I am not going to allow to become collateral damage in an adult situation. He was quiet for a moment. He called you Mama, he said. I know, I said. He has never. I know, I said again. Does it mean what I think it means? He asked. I thought about 5 years. About interesting stones and leaves with unusual shapes and drawings and 3 chapters read on the edge of a bed. About the specific, earned quality of a consistent presence in a child's life. It means he has a word, I said, for the quality of what he feels when I'm in the room. And that word is the closest one he has for that feeling. I paused. Whether the feeling produces the word because of something deeper, because of something the bond biology would describe as specific recognition, I am not qualified to say. But you think so, he said. I am not going to think about that, I said. Until you have had your conversations and you and Petra have made honest decisions. What I think doesn't matter until those things happen. He looked at me for a long time. 3 days, he said. 3 days, I said. I went back to the healing house. Asta had been right about one thing. I could not control what happened in the pack house. I could control being excellent at my job. I was excellent at my job. For 3 days. I saw every patient on schedule. I completed the documentation that had been accumulating. I consulted with Brost on 2 complex cases. I conducted the preliminary research for a new approach to the pack's seasonal wellness assessments that I had been meaning to do for 6 months. I was at the healing house from 7 every morning, and I left at 6 every evening, and I went to Asta's and I ate dinner, and I processed, and I slept. I did not go to the pack house. I did not contact Kale. I let the 3 days be 3 days. On the evening of the 3rd day, Asta's door knocked at 8 o'clock. It was Dren, with his father behind him. Dren was holding something in his hands. He looked at me. I made this, he said. He held out the drawing. It was the pack house. He had drawn it with the specific, confident imprecision of a 5-year-old who knew what he was trying to say and was saying it in the language available to him. The pack house. And in front of the pack house, 3 figures. A tall one, a smaller one, and one in between them. He had written, in the careful block letters that he had been practicing for months, the labels, Papa, Fun, and in the middle, smaller than both, me. I looked at this drawing. I looked at the 5-year-old who had made it. I looked at the man behind him who was not managing his expression. Buddy, I said. It's for you, Dren said. So you can put it up somewhere. I will put it up in the healing house, I said. In the best spot. He nodded, satisfied with this. Then, are you coming home? I looked at Kale. He looked at me. Petra isn't coming back, he said. Quietly, directly. We talked. For a long time. She made a decision that was honest and brave. She said that she could not. She said that what was here before she arrived was larger than what she could build. And she chose to go. I sat with that. I'm sorry, I said. Yes, he said. It was the right decision. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. No, I said. It doesn't. We looked at each other over Dren's head. I am not asking you to come back tonight, he said. Or this week. Or with any particular timeline. Then what are you asking? I said. I am asking, he said, if you want to come back at all. When the time is right. When the situation is honest. He paused. I am asking what you want. I looked at the drawing. The pack house with 3 figures. Papa. Fun. Me. I looked at the 5-year-old with the gray eyes and the serious attention who had reached through a window and opened a door and said a word that had started everything. I looked at the man behind him who was looking at me the way I had been not looking at him for 2.5 years. I want to come home, I said. Not dramatic. Not announced with the cinematic certainty of a story that had always known its ending. Just the honest fact. I know, Kale said. But not yet, I said. Not tonight. The situation needs to settle. Dren needs to settle. You need time. Yes, he said. And I need to come back because it's right, I said. Not because a space opened up. Yes, he said. Is that understood? I said. Yes, he said. It is. Dren was looking between us. So, he said. Eventually. I looked at him. Yes, I said. Eventually. He seemed to find this acceptable. Okay, he said. He held out his hand. I took it. Not for the healing house or the medical relationship or the professional register. Just because he was 5 years old and he was holding his hand out, and the holding of it was the most honest thing available. We walked back to the pack house. Not to stay. Just to walk. Just to be in the direction of eventually. 3 months. That was the time it took. Not because it was required by some external process or because anyone was being deliberately cautious. Because 3 months was what the situation actually needed. What Dren needed to process the changes. What Kale needed to find his footing in the new shape of things. What I needed to do the specific, private work of shifting from careful professional management to the honest acknowledgement of what I had been carrying for 2.5 years. 3 months of healing house visits and pack house dinners that were sometimes just the three of us and gradually felt like the three of us rather than 2+1. 3 months of Kale arriving at the healing house at the end of his governance day to collect Dren from the wellness assessment and staying for an hour because the conversation was good and the hour was available. 3 months of Dren bringing me things. The stones, the leaves, the drawings, more of them, now, with varying numbers of figures and varying levels of artistic precision, but consistently with the same 3 labels in careful block letters. And then, at the end of the 3 months, on an evening in late spring when the light was doing the specific thing it did at this time of year, the specific, horizontal golden thing that made everything look as if it was being seen with unusual clarity, I moved back into the pack house. Not into the room on the eastern side with the window that looked out at the pines. Into the room that was on the opposite side of the house. The one adjacent to Dren's. The one that made more sense. Faye had my new key cut. She gave it to me herself. She said, "This is the right key for the right door." I said, "Yes." She said, "Try it." I tried it. The door opened. Inside, Dren was sitting on the floor of the hallway with a drawing he had been working on. He looked up. He held it out. The pack house again. 3 figures again. Papa. Me. And in the middle, still smaller than both, but different from before. Before, the label had been me. Now it said, family. I looked at the drawing. I looked at the 5-year-old who had said a word through a window and opened a door and started everything. "Thank you," I said. "You can put it in the healing house," he said. "Next to the other one." "I'll put it right next to it," I said. Kale appeared from the kitchen. He looked at the drawing. He looked at me. "Dinner is almost ready," he said. Not a declaration. Not a ceremony. Just the ordinary, domestic, real fact of dinner being almost ready. "Good," I said. I came inside. The door closed behind me. There is something I have come to understand about the 3 months between eventually and home. Not everything, but the thing that mattered most. Petra had not been wrong. She had been right about the central fact, that the space she had tried to build in had been occupied, that what was already there was larger than what she could displace. But she had been wrong about what that meant. She had interpreted the occupation as deception, as something Kale had hidden from her, something he had brought her into without full disclosure. The truth was simpler and more complicated than that. The truth was that Kale had not known the full shape of what was there. Not because he was dishonest. Because the things you were closest to were the hardest to see clearly. Because you could be inside something significant for 2.5 years and call it a professional relationship, because calling it something else was inconvenient, and because the appropriate registers were the appropriate registers. He had been as close to it as I was. He had been managing the same thing I was managing. Neither of us had named it. And the 5-year-old with the gray eyes and the serious attention and the word had named it for us. With the specific, uncomplicated honesty of a child who had one word for the quality of a feeling and used it. Children were like that. They used the language they had for the feelings they recognized. They reached through windows. They opened doors. And sometimes the doors they opened let in the thing that had been waiting outside the entire time. If you stayed with this story from the locked door to the drawing to eventually, from the key that didn't fit to the key that did, then you already know what this was about. It was about a 5-year-old who understood something that 2 adults had been carefully not understanding for 2.5 years. About the word that started everything. About a door that opened from the inside. About the specific, patient honesty of a child who has one word for the quality of a feeling and uses it without apology. Children are like that. They cut through. They reach through windows. They open doors that adults have locked. And they say the word that the adults have been afraid to say. This channel is here every single week for everyone who has been standing on the outside of a door with a key that no longer fits. For everyone who has been keeping something in the place where it lives because the appropriate registers were the appropriate registers. For everyone who has been waiting for eventually arrives. It arrives the way Dren arrived at that door. Unhurried. Honest. On tiptoe. Subscribe. Hit that bell. Drop your location in the comments. I need to know where in the world someone needed to hear that the door opens from the inside. That the word gets said. That eventually becomes now. The next story starts where this one ends. With someone who has been keeping something in the right place for too long. By the end, they say the word. Don't miss it. See you there.